on to the Q&A. This is where we're happy to address any questions you have about predictive analytics. You can think of this as the free consulting segment of our webinar, open access to the modeling agency's advanced analytic gurus, senior consultants Keith McCormick and Scott Terry. Each question you submit will receive multiple perspectives. We do have a few great questions coming in now. There's still room for a couple more. We're going to try to wrap up on time at 5:30, and we can get rolling with just one question. So if you do have a question you want to submit, now's your time, and just enter it into the questions field of the webinar panel. I did get a question via email. We'll start with that one, but if you email now, I've kind of got that application closed. So if you do have a question, make sure it comes in through the webinar panel here. Let's see, Scott stepped out. He has not returned yet, but you'll be in great hands with Keith, and I can back up as needed. Let's start with the first question. This is from Efwa. Pardon if I didn't pronounce exactly correctly. The question is, if outliers, this came in during Scott's portion when he was going over outliers. If outliers observed are not due to chance and can be explained, what do you do? Do you build a model with outliers? How do you discern the effect of the outliers on the model? Keith?
Hi, I really like this question because it gets at one of the most interesting things about outliers. I remember attending a conference with a couple of folks from a cable company in Southeast Asia. In any case, what they found is that sometimes they had so many hours each month that there's no way that an individual or even a family could possibly do those hours. So what they were eventually able to intuit is that probably some folks were getting a family connection to the internet, but they were basically running a little internet cafe out of their home. So what does that have to do with our dilemma here about what to do with the outliers? When possible, if you can figure out that a group has a qualitative difference, not only a quantitative difference from the other cases. So in other words, it's not just a matter that they have a few more hours on the internet than the other cases, but the qualitative difference is that this is truly a business-to-business relationship, not a business-to-consumer relationship. What you can do, if you can figure it out, is you add another variable to the data that flags them as being business to business and business to consumer, and you can actually add that variable to the model. So you don't always take them out. If you can figure out why they're outliers, then you add that information in.
Thank you, Keith. Great response. Next question from Sam. After we learn and seek the right approach to establish an organizational predictive model, can you elaborate on the best ways to pick the right software and algorithms, as well as tools to start to apply to our problems? If you don't mind, Keith, I'll take a first pass at this one to say that, by the time we're looking at algorithms and tools, we should have done a lot of work up front to understand a great deal about our environment, about leadership objectives, about the available resources, about their condition, about, like Keith was saying, the deployment environment. How is that going to come into play? The experience of the team and the users of the software. And a lot of that, even if we do a pretty thorough assessment at the very beginning, we don't necessarily have all of the information that we're going to ultimately have to bear as we start encountering the realities of actual implementation, as we proceed into planning and model development. And there's some very capable open source tools that are available that we would recommend in starting with some of the prototyping of the models or building the first test models. And as Keith had mentioned in his segment, you're always going to find patterns. And we're going to get information that's going to drive the rest of the first pass through the implementation. So as we learn more about the needs of the software, because software is no small investment, you want to right-size it. You don't want to buy something that's going to be insufficient. You don't want to over-acquire and waste. So you have so much learning to do on the first pass that goes beyond what you can just assess in the first phase, that we typically recommend. First of all, we're vendor neutral, so we don't showcase or disparage any particular products. At the same time, we do have a favorite tool, and that would be the ones you already have in-house. If they're not available, then we'd recommend open source whenever possible. And then as we learn more about the requirements of the algorithms to be used and everything else that I had explained from what we amassed in the assessment as well as what we learned in the first pass-through, the full implementation process, then we'll have so much more context with which to make a right-sized selection of algorithms and particularly software tools. That's my perspective. Keith, what would you like to add? If I left any room.
I agree with everything that you've already shared with the group, Eric. So basically, you can't make a specific recommendation about software until after a proper assessment. But, you know, while we're all together here on the call, in the spirit of your question, I'll try to answer a little bit in generalities. There's basically 4 things that you need, you know, the software to do. You've got to have some way of exploring the data, because the modeling algorithms don't do all the work. Humans are very much part of this. You have to be kind of exploring and examining that data. You have to do some kind of ETL, so that's going to be merging, integrating data, that kind of thing. You've got to obviously do the modeling itself, and I think sometimes we worry too much about the modeling and we don't worry enough about the other pieces. And then finally, you have to have some way of deploying it. So as you think about those 4 things, explore, ETL, of course, extract, transfer, and load is what I mean by ETL. Modeling and deployment, what you really have to think about is what do you already have? What do you already have that does that? So let's say you feel that you have a good way of exploring your data. Who knows, you could even have something like a Tableau, which is super popular now, or something. And maybe you have some way of doing ETL, but you feel like you're only missing the algorithm piece. That puts you in a very different situation than someone that feels that maybe they need a little bit more and all. So the quick version is, as you reflect on those 4 things, is do I want to try to buy one solution that does it all? And that's going to send you kind of in the direction of these kind of workbench solutions. And they're neither right nor wrong. They either fit your situation or they don't, or possibly you want to mix. So for instance, maybe IT is helping out with the modeling team and they're quite content with doing the ETL with SQL, but you're kind of missing the algorithm piece, so you're looking only for that. So that's the quick answer in general terms. Again, you can't give specific advice without a proper assessment, but you've got those 4 things, and the question is it really, really important that the modeling team do all 4 in one tool? Some situations maybe that's a useful thing, but it's certainly not a requirement. Or do you want to have different people working in different tools doing those 4 things?
More great considerations. Thanks, Keith. And those are some of the realities that you really don't appreciate until you've gone through that first cycle. And that's a lot of the learning that we can gather as we go through the process the first time. So thanks for those great considerations, Keith. And thank you, Sam, for the fantastic question, as well as Efwa. We have a small group.
That,
Eric,
go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
The reason it's so important to do that assessment is that, let's say you think, oh my gosh, my hands are tied. I really have to throw myself at the mercy of a vendor rep, and they're going to solve my problem. Well, the next thing you know, you're going to be talking about a software purchase, and you're going to be in software training, and you're going to unintentionally, inadvertently, rush to modeling, right? Because you're going to be so focused on the software and the software training that you're going to completely forget to do the assessment. So it's so important to do that. Even if you do have tools in-house, you have to take a deep breath and do that proper assessment before you jump to the modeling piece.
Absolutely. Very worthwhile addition. And it's not that the software vendors are bad, it's just that's what they do. They want to license their software. Their software do, you know, they do great things. And it, you know, comes back to the premise of this this webinar is the upside down rocket on the launch pad. And it's a good rocket. And software
Eric, you know, they're selling you tools to help you with the modeling algorithms, right? They're not selling you tools to help you with the assessment. So again, I agree with you. They're good people, and they're usually quite knowledgeable as well. But since they're giving you a tool that's helping you in the middle of the process, they're going to just be one more reason why everybody wants to jump to the middle.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why they're starting the book on Chapter 5, and we're creating that sophisticated rocket, a very good one, without talking about mission control. And if we don't have a developed mission, then at the end of the day, we've launched out into space with just to meander into the abyss. And that's what we see time and time again, is starting that book on Chapter 5, and it never comes back to implement properly. And we have 5 minutes remaining. What we can do, because we do have a small group, and at 25 after the hour, which is almost a half an hour past regular business hours on the East Coast, some are filtering out. So we're down to about a dozen people at this point for what was already kind of a small event. I was just about to go into another poll here just for fun to see, what industries do we have with us today, but we do have another question coming in from Eddie. So let's do this first, and if we come up on the end of the half hour, we'll wrap up. If not, we'll just do one more fun Q&A or one poll. So Eddie asks, I heard that to do predictive modeling, we have to apply all the predictive models available to the data. For instance, if there are 100 models available, then we use all of those, then choose the best one. Is that correct? So this has to do with that iterative process, right, Keith? And when we go through models to test, I mean, I would say the corollary to that, which is absolutely wrong, is that you build a model. You always build many models and test them and take the winner. So Eddie asks, I heard that to do predictive modeling, we have to apply all of the predictive models available to the data. For instance, if there's 100 models available, we use all of those, then choose the best one. Is that correct?
Okay, this is a really interesting one, Eric. The initial answer is that there is a lot of truth to that, but watch out, right? Because the way that the question is phrased, I'm gonna make a little bit of an assumption, but Eddie, I would invite you to ask a follow-up if I'm wrong about this. The sense that I get is what you're describing is that you have access to 100 algorithms. So think about it, everybody. What would it mean to build 100 models using 100 algorithms? That really means that you're only running those algorithms once each, which by implication means you're not changing the settings, you're not adjusting the parameters, and so on. So believe it or not, I would say that that was not a very thorough job to do only 100 algorithms with no adjustments to settings or parameters. And worse than that, data prep is really where it's at. So if you're only running those modeling algorithms one time each, that means that no experimentation is being done with the data prep. So the correct part of that is that modeling does require trial and error. One of my favorite thought leaders on this subject, Eric hears me mention this gentleman's name all the time, is Tom Kabaza, and he has his 9 laws of data mining, and one of the laws of data mining is no free lunch for the data miner, which basically says the only way that you can know which algorithm is the best one is to try them all, okay? So that's the sense in which the answer is yes, that's correct. But what you'd be forgetting is that you have to tune the models and you have to do a good job with data prep. So truth be told, even if you were using a tool that only had a dozen algorithms in it, you would still have to try more than 100 models, if that makes sense. Not just trying one each. That's a little bit technical, so a little bit hard to answer verbally, but I hope that was helpful, Eddie, and I would be glad to take a follow-up if you care to.
Sure, and no follow-up as of yet, so you may have addressed the question as Eddie intended. And with that, we're out of questions. We're also coming up on the end of the half hour. I was going to go into a poll, but I think we push over a little bit, and was kind of dragging my feet a little bit there, and just in case Eddie had a follow-up. But at 29 past the hour, we'd better draw this event to a close, and I'd certainly like to thank our attendees today for your sustained interest and your active participation, as well as Scott and Keith for your great presentation segments, and Keith for your Q&A support. Fantastic responses, great questions. We'll follow up with an email shortly with some resources and suggestions that will hopefully be useful to you, and from there, we'll hope that you'll consider joining us at a public classroom or live online training event soon. Make sure to go to the website and check out the schedule and details for next month's live online Predictive Analytics for the Enterprise Model Development online class, as well as the full schedule for courses for the start of 2017. Now, if you don't have a training budget or your schedule just doesn't fit, but you'd like the guidance of a seasoned mentor, you might be interested in the modeling agency's Escort on Call program. Escort on Call is essentially a retainer account that provides remote open access to a TMA senior consultant. Simply open up an Escort on Call account, and you've instantly added a wealth of experience and capability to your existing bench without expanding payroll, administrating complicated contracts, or taking elevated risk on larger commitments. We'll get you the answers you want, guide you through it, tactically or strategically, show you how it's done, implement any analytic tasks you may wish to delegate, and then remain on call until the next time you need us. And meanwhile, when we're not actively working, you're not paying a dime. So a link to the Escort on Call description page will be among the resources included in the follow-up email. On behalf of myself, Scott, and Keith, thank you again for attending Predictive Analytics Failure to Launch. Have a very pleasant afternoon and evening, and this brings the webinar broadcast to a close.